The SS Federal was a collier, which means it was carrying coal. And it was on a run from Port Kembla to Albany, and it was lost in a storm on the 21st of March, 1901. The lighthouse keeper on Gabo Island said that the SS Federal passed so close to shore that he could have tossed a biscuit into her. In defiance of regulations, it continued to hug the coast, and it went down far off the recommended southwest coast, coming to grief on submerged rocks during a storm with full loss of life. We went out to look for the SS Federal as part of a collaborative agreement with Heritage Victoria and the Maritime Archaeological Association of Victoria. This was on board CSIRO Marine National Facility vessel RV Investigator, which is the nation's blue water research vessel. It is a 93-meter, so big, ship, and it houses 43 people. That's including crew and scientists. This was really the first maritime heritage survey project that the CSIRO or investigator had dedicated more than just 1 or 2 days of ship time to. So we were quite excited at the opportunity to look for more than one vessel. On this particular voyage, we had 5 unidentified targets that we surveyed for, which means you draw a box around it and then run lines over it for as long as necessary in order to determine if something is or isn't there. And we had one site, the SS Federal, that we knew was there, but we didn't know exactly where was. The SS Federal was found in 2012 by an avocational dive team based out of Victoria. They were required by federal and state legislation to report the location of the site to Heritage Victoria, but unfortunately did not provide a complete set of coordinates. So Heritage Victoria obviously wants to know where the site is, because if you don't know where it is, you can't protect it. You can't do anything. You can't tell people where it is. You don't know if anything goes wrong with it. You don't know if anybody's going to run into it. You don't know what's on. So they're quite frustrated and they want to know where it is. So we said we'd help. We had a rough idea of where the site was. We have a really exceptional suite of geophysical mapping equipment on board RV Investigator that's mounted on the gondola below the vessel. So we put in some survey coordinates, rough survey coordinates, and trucked over to the projected location of SS Federal. And luckily enough, we're able to drop down on the site itself. The site is located in just over 100 meters of water, so it's just at that interface of tech diving capability and deep water investigation. SS Federal is lying on the edge of a really deep scour, so that's a chunk that's missing out of the seabed. That scour is there because of the location of the site, so it's in a high flow area. And because the shipwreck is there, it's acting as an impediment to the flow of the water. And the sediment is actually being carved out around it, like if you put a stick in the water at the beach, and the water comes in and flows back out and comes back in and flows back out, and you'll actually see a hole or scour start to curve around that stick. That's what's happening to the shipwreck. We were able to image part of it as well. RV Investigator has a drop camera, which is basically a big steel frame with some high-tech cameras mounted on it. At that depth, we were able to send down a couple of the GoPros, as well as the traditional camera that's mounted on the system, and take footage of a variety of locations across the site, from midships moving to the bow and then from midships moving to the stern. There were a lot of fish on the site, so it was quite difficult to see what you were looking at in real time, but there are some really exceptional programs now that can remove the fish from the imagery so that you can get a better idea of what you're looking at. Heritage Victoria now know where it is. Yay! That's good. They know where it is, and they have a really good map of the site. So we've been able to provide that almost immediately. So I think it was 2 in the morning that night, I sent out an email saying, "We found it, here it is, here's the beautiful imagery, more to come." That's one of the things that shipwrecks do for us is you can have the story, you can have the understanding of where it may be, where it is, but once you know that it exists, that you know that it is in fact out there, it does tend to feature more prominently in your ongoing management report. So we'll see. I think that they may have to figure out something to do with that scour. They may have to visit it again in future, or maybe an investigator will go back. It was quite exciting to find this site. A lot of the time in archaeological discovery, you don't know if you're going to find a site. You think you probably aren't going to find it. I mean, most of the time you don't find it. These shipwreck surveys go on for 10, 15, 20 years, and sometimes even at the end of that, you don't find it. I mean, you just have to look at the search for the Bonham Richard, the Hunley, or even AE1. A lot of the time in search and discovery, you have that, which this time I had a pretty good feeling that we were going to find it. I knew that we had coordinates. They weren't exact, but they were close enough, so we had a pretty solid search area. The thing with a vessel of that size speed is that you can take out a 2 by 4 meter nautical mile survey block with full coverage within a couple hours. Really increases your ability to do shipwreck survey because you're covering massive swaths of land. I kind of thought we'd find it, but I was really happy that we did, because that was one of the primary reasons for the Maritime Heritage Surveys and Voyage. So we could call up Heritage Victoria and say, check, we did it. I didn't actually know that much about it before. I knew what had been provided to me by Heritage Victoria. It's a great story because, they just came in too close to the coast. Everybody thinks it was lost in a storm. We know that it wrecked, but we don't know why. And we still don't know why. But we might have a chance of finding out. But first, I'd like to mention what we think happened. And what we think happened is that the SS Federal came to grief in a storm somewhere off Gabo Island. They were presumably traveling too close to shore, and even the lighthouse actually even saw them. But unfortunately, at that time, the lighthouses couldn't really communicate with each other effectively. They had no signaling connection, they had no telephone connection. So they couldn't say, hey, this ship looks like it's in trouble. Keep an eye out for it further up the coast, would you? And let us know if anything happens. That would have been really, really helpful in this situation, because what happened to the crew of the SS Federal is that many of them washed up on shore, dead. Wearing life vests, in lifeboats, so we know that they had time to get off the vessel, they had time to get to shore. But unfortunately, by the time they got there, there was no help for them. There was no one waiting for them. There was no one there that saw them come in, and they all died. And if we'd had a system in place that could have protected these guys a little bit better, maybe more of them, maybe just one would have survived. So this story, obviously a massive tragedy that was covered quite significantly in the Victorian and national newspapers. And people were understandably very angry and very upset. Two things resulted from this. One was a relief fund that was put together for the families of those who were lost. The other thing were some small changes that were put in place with the lighthouse signaling station in Victoria, like an actual telephone, which was incredibly useful in future. Everard Station was also upgraded to a recognized signaling station, so that meant it was capable of communicating with ships and other stations, so not just lighting a light. So they held a Marine Court of Inquiry into the loss of the Federal, but even that was unable to uncover any conclusive evidence of what happened to the ship. The wreck was known to have happened by the 23rd of March, but they didn't send a ship out to look for it until the 2nd of April, until they were sure it was the Federal. So even at that time, the general public consensus was that lives could have been saved if the government had moved a bit faster. Just a few weeks after we came back from locating the site of the SS Federal, I did a search through the Australian National Maritime Museum's collection to see if we had any material related to the vessel. And imagine my surprise and delight and overweening excitement when I realized we have a collection of 128 documents from the SS Federal, and none of them had been previously digitized. I wrote one of those emails, you know, the one that start with squee, to our senior registrar and said, oh, please, 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 can you pull these out, please? And she did, and it's wonderful. I'm still in the process of going through them, and the registration department has been absolutely amazing in setting them up for me to look through and actually telling me a little bit more about what's included within them. But even just an initial search has uncovered a wealth of information, in particular related to the distribution of monies from the relief fund. And it's one of those things where you kind of realize that times change, but people don't. There are two sets of letters. One is from the fireman's mother. It's an interesting letter, and then it says, please do not give any of the relief fund monies to my son's wife, because she's not really his wife. She has been living in sin with another man, and she doesn't deserve them, and that's why he moved to Australia in the first place. You should instead give the money to me, because I am his fabulous mother. I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, obviously. Now, letter 2 is the response from the wife that says, I have a child, I am poor, I need the money. What is the mother talking about? This is ridiculous. I've been supporting this man, and here's a letter of good character from my minister. Please give me the money. Now, I have to figure out who actually got the money in the end. I haven't yet made that connection so far, but isn't it fascinating to see how people can react? And you don't know if maybe this is something that's driven by grief. It's terrible to say that it's driven just by, you know, financial gain, but it could be, we don't know. But one of the roles of museums is to make these documents and these materials available to the public so that we can kind of make our own decisions, and we can also realize that we're all really kind of just the same. Give you an idea of what an event like this, the toll it takes on a community. And one of the ways that we can see this is through a series of telegrams that are related to the panic over bodies washing up on the beach. The local constabulary and other volunteers not really knowing what to do. One telegram to see if it conveys to you what it conveys to me, which is, I don't know what to do. From Malakuta, Victoria to the insurance company in Melbourne. Cannot get down by road or land on beach to get bodies. Weather bad, rivers in flood. Coffins and men, all Malakuta. What must I do? Am waiting orders. If coffins lost, can get men to exhume and send later. Signature R.W. Wilson. You can tell that they are just trying to recover these bodies in the best way that they can. But the weather is against them, the situation is against them, and one hopes that eventually they got the support they needed to get everybody home. Finding the documents within the Australian National Maritime Museum collection is a great thing because it gives us the ability to carry this story forward and to add a historical element, a collection element to the archaeological element, which is really what historical archaeology is all about, is layering all those different means of knowledge collecting and tying them together in a way that tells a more complete and cohesive story. So for us, the fact that we are, as a museum, directly connected to this story has great meaning to me. Not only were we on the voyage, we can hopefully be a part of putting some of its mysteries to rest.